You're listening to Reboot.
Reboot.
A study from the government revealed that only 50% of returning vets who need veteran mental health treatment actually get those services. Both active duty service members and veterans face barriers to treatment for mental issues. The fear of being seen as weak, the stigma associated with mental health issues, personal embarrassment about service-related mental disabilities, long wait times to receive mental health treatment. These issues are real. And this podcast understands that. Welcome to Reboot. The war isn't over yet. David Kagi and Jared Standiford, with a combined 20 years of service in the U.S. Navy. Both have had many struggles with mental health, and both see a growing epidemic in the military community. But we're working together to reach out to help the community recognize that mental health is important. This is Reboot, and this is David and Jared.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Reboot, The War Isn't Over Yet. My name is David, and I have Jared here. How you doing this week, Jared?
I'm doing well. How about you?
It's doing okay. Another week, my life is like moving 1,000 miles per second. I'm trying to figure everything out.
You're never going to figure everything out.
No, never. That's so true. So true. But I start work Monday, officially, first day Monday. I don't even know what time I'm supposed to show up. I've asked a question, and I haven't got a response. So I'm just going to aim for 7 a.m. unless they tell me otherwise. Because I'm pretty sure it's a 7 to 7 shift, but I don't know.
I'm guessing you're going to have all that fun HR stuff for at least the first week. But
yeah, I know I have to do a drug screen and some other stuff. But no, we'll see what happens. But yeah, so that's what's going on over here. How you doing?
Been pretty busy working on stuff around the house. My family's still in Texas, so that's a challenge. It's hard to not be with my kids, and I mean, I know you know that,
right?
And I've only been out of their lives for a couple weeks, and that's just been that's hard, but I'm getting by with that and working a lot. I've been trying to do some extra stuff at work to try to get ahead a little bit. And I'm going camping this weekend with some friends, so that'll be good. I'm going to a pretty remote campsite up in Vermont. We're going to go to I think it's called the Green River Reservoir.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
So that'll be interesting. I know the site you have to kayak in. You can't drive to it, so it's going to be kind of interesting because.
So is your daughter going to be there?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's just me.
Okay. Daughter coming, 3-year-old, in kayak canoe.
Yeah, I got to get everything together today, which is going to be a challenge. I've been so busy, I haven't got everything packed up, and then I wanted to take tomorrow off of work to have time to do all that, but I can't take tomorrow off. So
right,
there's that.
Right. Yeah. I was actually talking to one of my good friends from way back when. He lives out by Buffalo. He's a English teacher out there, and we were talking about trying to go backpacking. There's a trail. The summer camp we worked at, the leadership and training backpacking trip was at this trail in Pennsylvania, the Susquehanna Trail System. And we were actually talking earlier today about going backpacking, just the two of us out there. And so I'm trying to figure that out, the logistics of that, because it's a pretty big trail. I think he wants to do the whole loop. I mean, you can do certain sections or whatever, but we got to figure that out.
How long a trip would that be?
I think the total loop, if you do start to finish the whole, because it's a circular loop, I think it's 80 miles, so 3-4 days, depending on your pace. So.
Yeah, that's depending on how steep the grade is and everything. We did the most I've done in one day, and it was accidentally that we did this much because we took a wrong turn. But right. I did 21 miles in one day. That was miserable.
Yeah,
but
well, so I'll never forget it because so there's the one section. It's called Cardiac Hill, and I'll never I was like 13 or 14 when I went on this leadership and training backpacking trip. And man, I'll never forget hitting Cardiac Hill. It was like 3/4 of the way through the day. And this thing's probably 70, 80 degree straight up. It's probably a couple 100 feet, start to finish. It is just, you got like a 30, 40 pound pack on your back and you're just trying to slosh up there. It was rough, but
that's fun. Those experiences are good for you though. It definitely shows you, like, puts things in perspective. Like, I know the one I'm talking about that we did was Gothic Mountain up in the Adirondacks. It's one of the high peaks. And I was a little bit arrogant. I grew up in South Dakota, so we had the Black Hills there, and a lot of the elevations up there are higher than you'd get in the Adirondacks. But man, the terrain is so much more rugged in the Adirondacks than it is in the Black Hills.
Yes.
Yeah, you get up there, and we got to like the top of Gothic, and you get out of the trees, and it's just like rock up at the top, and there's just a cable drilled into the rock, and you have to pull yourself up with the cable. But the fun part is we did this in the spring, so it was ice and snow on the way up, and then there's no place. It's so steep there. There's no place to like sit down and take off your snowshoes. So you're on the rock in your snowshoes, holding onto a cable, and like I got like halfway up, and I found a little ledge, and like you put like part of your butt cheek on the ledge and pull one of your snowshoes off and try to throw it on your pack, and then switch sides and then pull your other snowshoe off and put it on your pack. And you finally get to the top and you look down there and you're like, wow, like if I would have fallen right there, I would have I would have rolled about 100 feet before I hit a tree and stopped. And it's like, that was really sketchy. And you get to the top, and we went down the backside, and when we were up at the top, we got socked in by a bank of fog and it started raining on us a little bit. And that's what hosed us, is there was snow up there. So you couldn't really see the trails that well. We got socked in. You couldn't see like from me to 5 feet in front of me. We missed our turn on the way down. So we ended up summiting 2 peaks on the way out instead of just that one. Because once you started going down that one side, you couldn't go back up unless you had climbing gear, because you had to go down this icy slope, and it was like switchback. You go one way and you have to jump down like a 4 or 5 foot ledge and then go the other way and jump down like another ledge. But trying to go back up, not going to happen unless you have like ice axes or a rope or something. You're not getting back up that thing. So we were committed at that point. We knew we got about 100 yards down that, and then we knew we'd taken the wrong turn, but we're like, well, we're committed now. You're going for it.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, I mean, I love backpacking. I love camping. It's something I haven't really done since I joined the Navy. Mm-hmm. Like for me, I mean, I wasn't going to do it in school. I definitely wasn't going to do it in prototype for sure. And then by the time, San Diego, I mean, that was a terrible time in my life anyways. Like, and when I did have time off, I was trying to spend it with my wife. Like she doesn't like backpacking or camping, but
yeah,
this new job is going to give me some opportunities to do that. So
yeah, and that's good for you to have hobbies and have some things that are for you. Yes. Is important, because that is one of the biggest mental health things that I struggle with, because I caretake way too much and I don't set boundaries for myself. So I end up resentful and angry and depressed because I don't ask for what I need, and I feel selfish trying to say like, hey, I need to go camping, or I need to go for a hike, or I need to go out and do something with my friends, even though it's like, once every couple of weeks. I'm not like asking to do it every day. Right. I still feel selfish doing it, and I have a hard time taking time to do it. And
yeah, I think a lot of times we get super caught up in the things that we find important in life, whether that's work, whether that's things around the house, and we don't take that time. And that's when, especially I'm pretty sure the same is for you, is that's when we start getting ourselves into trouble mentally, because having that time to do the things that you need to do is important for yourself. So,
yeah. I kind of see some of that just in my day-to-day work too. I find that if I schedule breaks and take more breaks, I'm more productive. It's kind of counterintuitive. Like, it's weird because I look at it as like, Navy, it was all just soldier on, push through. And now like I'm sitting at a desk doing work, and like you can only stare at a computer screen for a certain length of time and you are ineffective. Like I get about in the morning, I do about an hour and a half ish stretches, and then I need a little break because otherwise I started making mistakes and having to redo stuff, and I'm not effective. In the afternoon, I have to shorten it. I've found to about an hour because my attention isn't as well. I'm just getting burned out by the afternoon. So
right. So Dan Aguirre is watching. Dan and I were on the Truman together, and he goes,
Nice.
"How do you get past that?" I'm not quite sure exactly what he means by that, because I know there's a slight delay, so I just want to clarify. Dan, what get past what exactly?
What is that?
Yeah, because I mean, so if you're talking about get past the part where like you don't take care of yourself, or I mean, the best way is to just start doing the things that you need to do to help you. Like I know, like with myself, like I have 3 very hyperactive children, and like I'm not going to be able to take hours and hours every week, on top of my job to go and take my kids and uh, you know do all these things, and then also take time for myself. Like it's just there's not enough time in a week. But you need to set aside at least some time every week, preferably at least once a day, to do certain things for yourself, whether it's reading, journaling, writing, working out, etc.
Yeah. Well, it's all a compromise. Part of my problem too is I had I wanted to feel sorry for myself about it. So I had a very all or nothing mentality about it. I still do that sometimes, where instead of going for a 20-minute run, because that's what I have for time, I'll be like, oh, I don't have an hour to work out, so I'm just not going to work out. Like that's not how it doesn't work, because you're
Right.
especially with like kids and family, it's hard to get that full block of time. You can do it if you make it a serious priority and you get your spouse on board and you really, 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 really prioritize it. But you're kind of asking a lot sometimes with that, depending on your situation. Especially in my situation, that's asking a lot to have that every single day.
Right.
So what I started doing with my exercise is I run at night. I help put the kids to bed. About 8 o'clock, both our kids are in bed. I sit on the couch as soon as the kids are in bed, I set the intention. When the kids are in bed, I will put my running shoes and my shorts on. And then once they're on, it's easy for me to get out the door and run because I've taken that step and I've set the intention. But I put them on and then I go sit on the couch for about 15 minutes to an hour, or 15 minutes to half an hour, to make sure that the kids are asleep and they're not going to wake up and come downstairs and be a problem. Once I'm pretty sure they're down, I put a headlamp on and I go for a run. And it doesn't matter that it's in the dark. And sometimes it's an hour long run. I'll run 4 miles sometimes.
Right.
It just depends on the night. But that's a place where I have found that I can make time for myself, and that time I often listen to a book while I'm running. So I'll listen to a book or a podcast while I'm running, so I get some of that stimulation too. And it's good. It's time for me. It's almost like meditation. So
speaking of which, hold on, I wanted to bring something up today. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, Joe.
Yeah, this last week, and so it's a police psychologist.
Oh wow, I got to look at this one. I haven't heard that.
Yeah. No, it was because there's so many like parallels between what she was talking about going on right now, like in the police culture with overtime and everything else, and the stressful situations, the lack of training, and everything else. That I was just looking at it, I was like listening to this, and I'm like, this is exactly what's going on in the military too. And it was great. Which one was it? You can talk if you want there. If you can put in something.
Yeah, I almost pursued that as a path getting out of the military. I thought about trying to go be a police officer, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm very glad I didn't do that at this point.
You and me both.
Well, one, and I'm not saying that to knock, like police officers have a very difficult job, and I have a lot of respect for that. But looking at it just for me, for my mental health, that would have been probably the worst thing I could have done is to do
Right.
that. And
Yeah, no, I mean, she's a great speaker, from what I could tell. I mean, obviously, I listened to the whole thing. Why can't I find this one episode? But it was. I wish I could remember everything from this podcast right now, but it was so good. Nancy Panza.
that sounds interesting. I'm gonna have to, like I said, I'm gonna have to check it out too. But yeah, if you have anything to share from that, that's a.
So I mean, she's talking about, and I think this more so affects the other branch as opposed to the Navy. Obviously, we deal with the problems that we deal with in the Navy are extensive amounts of out to sea time compared to at home time. I mean, even when you throw in like a 3-year short duty, like for our rate, it's 4 and 3, and then 3, 3, 3, 3 after that. 3 years at sea, 3 years, at shore, and that is a little bit of a recharge. But the problem is that when you're like 2 years in, you start just burning out. I can't even find it. Did they take this thing down? I can't even find it.
We'll have to check later. But
yeah,
that with the nuke program specifically, I totally understand that being burned out in the middle. And also, like, we weren't really taught very good coping mechanisms, I don't feel like, in the military. Like, nobody really taught us that. And I didn't have them. I didn't possess those tools of my own accord either. So being able to deal with that stress just wasn't something I was able to do. And
right.
also, if we're being honest, the shore duties as a nuke are hot garbage. Like, going to prototype is barely a shore duty. You're still working rotating shift work. You're still, it's rough. It's not a fun shore duty. And for people who don't know, so the way deployment cycles work. So there are other branches that have, they have their own deployment cycles. They'll deploy for a certain amount of time, and then they'll be home for another amount of time. And when they're home, it just depends on the job, what they're doing. Some jobs you stay gone. Like, if you're like an Air Force PJ or a SEAL or something like that, like, you stay gone because you're training the whole time. You're going to all these TDY places, jumping out of airplanes, doing all that kinds of crazy stuff. For us, we go on deployments, long deployments on ships and submarines. And then when we're home, in between that, but still attached to the ship, it's still a kind of a tough rotation. You're at work a lot. You spend a lot of time on the ship. You do a lot of work. There's not a lot of home time, even when you're home. But then you're supposed to be able to, in the Navy, to rotate to a shore duty. And that shore duty is kind of supposed to be a little bit of a reprieve to make sure you can recharge your batteries and spend some time with your family. But unfortunately, as a nuke, when you go to that shore duty, it's typically prototype a lot of times, which the prototype is one of the training platforms in the pipeline, which the pipeline is how we train people to be nukes. And the prototype, you're still working rotating shift work. So you're working a days of swings in the mid shift, and you're rotating between them, and you're working 7 days straight a lot of times. And even one of the sections, you have like less than 48 hours off before you have to be back. And it's a rough schedule. It's not a very relaxing schedule. And I wish that we had the manning or a way to give people a little bit more of a reprieve in there.
Right. But, I mean, so I was one of the more fortunate people. I ended up at nuclear regional maintenance department. I was in Groton for 3 years, and I mean, that was great. I think it was probably one of the best nuke shore duties you can get. Unfortunately for me, right smack dab in the middle of that was my niece's murder, which did not help things.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think that if you go to prototype, you're not getting a break. If you go to A school, Power School, or an NRMD, Marmac, Swarmic, any of those places, you're getting, I think, a decent deal on shorty. But you're going to prototype, I don't think that they should even count that as a shorty. They should probably consider doing something with that, like what they do with Guam. Like, if you end up going to subtender in Guam as your shorty, which is also one of the bad ones in my opinion, because it's basically a sea duty.
and you have to live in Guam.
Yeah, that blows my mind how they call that a shore duty because you're still going out to sea. Like,
right,
what?
right.
How is this a shore duty? Like,
so they, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if this is how it originally was. I don't think it was originally this way, but now it's a split tour. You do a year and a half in Guam, and then you do a year and a half at Prototype. So they're literally taking the two worst shore duties and making them split tours.
Whose brilliant idea was that? Like, that's
they had to find a way to get more people to like agree to go to Guam. So that's their like incentive is if you go to Guam for a year and a half, we'll bring you back, and you should go work at Prototype.
I would think that almost would be worse. I'd almost rather stay in Guam because you move in the middle of your tour, and then you're gonna have to move again to go to your ship. And like,
I mean, I think for people without families, it's not that big of a deal. But for me, that would be terrible.
If you're one of those dudes that lives like a very Spartan lifestyle, then that wouldn't be so bad. But I mean, if you live that type of lifestyle, Guam's the place for you. If you want to go climb and fish and swim and dive and do all that stuff, Guam is a paradise for that kind of stuff.
Right.
But other than that, you have bars and strip clubs. That's about it. And
exactly.
That's just not for me.
Lots of great mountain bike trails, though.
Yeah,
fantastic. I mean, I would go back to Guam for like 2 days. It's not a place I ever really want to go back to, but if like someone like offered it for free, I'd go back for like 2 days, do some snorkeling, get some like mountain biking in or something, and then get out of there. Not a favorite place, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those places I don't mind visiting. Like going there on deployment was kind of nice. I mean, you had some decent places to eat. The water's beautiful. There's some decent things to do, but it's living there would be not ideal to me. I wouldn't want to do that. It's kind of like living, like I've heard the same thing from some people about Hawaii. Like living in Hawaii, there's only so much island, and you kind of you get a little stir crazy after a while.
I mean, when we were on Reagan, we went to Hawaii so many times. I did 2 rim packs, so I was in Hawaii all the time. And then we hit Hawaii in 2011 too, and I've been to Hawaii enough that like my wife wants to go to Hawaii, and so I'm like, do we have to? I'd rather just go to, and I hate San Diego too. A lot of people love San Diego. I hate San Diego. I'd rather go back to San Diego than go to Hawaii because at least I'll spend less money. But
yeah, Hawaii is expensive. I think we were there for the first rim pack. I think this is the rim pack we were both on probably.
Yeah, 2010.
2010. I think we were there for like 12 days or something like that. Man, you want to talk about being broke. I was broke as a joke. Like I had no money left after leaving the place.
Yeah, so both rim packs, right? Opening and closing ceremonies. Your opening ceremonies is like, I think it's like 13, 14 days, both times. And then closing ceremonies is like 8 days, 6 days, something like that. So, and that's over like a course of like a month and a half, like 2 months.
Yeah.
And, in between that, you're out to sea the whole time doing ridiculous general quarters drills over and over and over again. It's the worst. But, I mean, rim pack's all about being in Hawaii for like basically a month straight, just, broken up. Sorry, a month over 2 different visits.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I can't remember, was it rim pack that we hit Victoria, Canada?
So I got there right after you guys pulled out of Victoria.
Oh, you missed it. This is Victoria. Victoria was pretty cool. That was it was cool to go to a place that is not familiar with sailors.
Right.
Because you get a lot of people just coming up to you and asking you about, what's your story? Who are you? Why are you wearing this? Because we were also required to be out in town in uniform for one of the days.
Yeah.
Which I actually think was kind of cool. Like I thought it was stupid when we first pulled in. I was like, why do I have to wear this uniform out? I don't want to do this. But after I did it and I kind of understood what was going on. Like it was a community relations thing. We were trying to show off a little bit. And it was kind of cool to go out and like be a representative and like have, because people were super interested. Like lots of people came up to us and talked.
I heard that a lot of you guys got free meals, free drinks.
Yeah, I didn't pay for a damn thing when I was in uniform. Yeah. Like I got free. I walked by a sandwich shop, and the woman that was in there walked out with a sandwich, like chased me down, and she's like, "Do you want this?" I was like, "Yeah, I want it."
Yeah, no, I met you guys in Hawaii, and that's when I met up with the Reagan was in Hawaii. So I missed out on Victoria, but
it's a good place. Yeah, it's a good place. It was interesting to see. It's definitely not built for a carrier. There's too many sailors in one place, but it was still fun. It was cool.
I mean, so's Guam.
Yeah.
You can say that about a lot of ports. Bahrain.
Yeah. Bahrain, getting drunk in the sandbox is about all that happens in Bahrain.
Well, so the one time we went to Bahrain in 2011, the second class test results came out, and I made second class. It was a recipe for disaster. Like I didn't even know I made it. I was already out on Liberty, and Perry, good old Perry, came, like, he saw me, he like spotted me from a distance and came running. I was like, "Hey, you made second class." I was like, "I'm re-enlisting in 3 weeks." I was like, "Why?"
Give it to someone else. Give it to
Give it
someone else.
Well, you remember Dave Jones? Davy Jones?
Yeah, I remember Dave Jones.
Yeah. He was so mad at me. He was so angry. He's like, "Why did you make second class? You're already realistic." I was like,
Man,
I did better on the test than you. I don't. What do you want from me?
I forgot about Jones. That was
I have some great video of Jones in Thailand.
Oh, geez. I can only imagine. A lot of crazy things happen on port visits in the Navy, and yeah, there's some, you see some interesting places and you get to do some things that are just, it's bananas. Like it's a lot of fun though. That was a bright spot of the Navy. I could have done with less drinking, but other than that, I definitely enjoyed my port visits, and it was cool to see all the different countries and spend time in all those interesting places. And especially, I was glad that I was on the West Coast ship because you see all of Asia, and that would be very difficult to see on your own dime, to like fly to all those different places. Whereas I feel like Europe, you could fly there and see quite a bit.
And you can take trains.
Yeah.
Once you're in Europe, you can get around Europe fairly easily.
I still need to do it. I want to go to Europe badly. I want to see like the Nordic countries very badly.
Yeah, I mean, so my 2018 deployment went to Crete. We went to France, went to England, and everything else got canceled.
Ugh.
So, but at one point we were supposed to go to Norway. At one point we were potentially going to go to Croatia. At one point we were potentially going to go to Italy. All those got canceled. So
I've heard Italy is a really good time, and Norway I would be very excited about because, like I said, I really want to go see the Nordic countries. I just, something about, like, I see pictures of like the beautiful mountains and stuff like that. I'm like, that's,
yeah. I mean, so we spent, I think it was 15 days in the Vestfjord, which is like the biggest fjord up there in Norway, because we were doing the Arctic operations up there. And so, like, you look out either direction and you just see the Norway, the mountains of Norway. And it was beautiful. And we saw like the Northern Lights, and it was cool. It was really cool, but we didn't get to actually pull into port.
Got to see it from the ship.
Canceled, yeah. Just we had to mess with the Russians, and the Russians were messing back, and blah blah blah.
Oh, those fun games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that gentleman clarify his question on the live?
I think we got it right,
Yeah.
because he said something about feeling selfish. So, like,
it's going to happen. So you're going to feel selfish when you first start doing it. It's going to happen, and that's something you're going to have to get through. So what I would encourage you to do for that feeling selfish part is to really like sit down and maybe journal or think about it, and like really think about what you're asking for, and think about, is this really selfish? Is this really, am I really asking too much? And I think if you sit down and try to look at it, kind of detach yourself from the situation and look at it like, or maybe think about it like this: if one of your friends was doing that, would you feel bad for his wife? Would you think that he was wronging his wife in any way if he was doing that?
And the other side of that too is, you have, since Dan, I know you're married.
Yeah.
I've met your wife once. You take time for yourself, but then on the back end, you also give time to her. That's just as important, is making sure that she has time to herself as well.
And you articulate what that is, that if there's like kind of a reciprocal thing, What you don't want to fall into is where the expectations aren't known. Because this is another thing I've screwed up. I like telling you guys about things I've screwed up. So hopefully you won't screw it up because I'm intimately familiar with the things that I have done wrong. And one of those things is something that Dr. Robert Glover in the book No More Mr. Nice Guy calls covert contracts. So if you're doing something with the expectation of receiving something back and you haven't exactly articulated what that is what he would call a covert contract, and that is inherently dishonest. Even to the point of if you are telling your spouse, I love you, just because you want to hear it back, that's the same thing. That's a covert contract. You're doing something to receive something. You're not saying I love you because you just want to express that you love your spouse. You're saying it because you want to hear it back. So that's inherently dishonest. And it really hit me in that book when he said, if you're doing this, you're a liar. He straight up said that. And that hurt when he said that. Like I was like offended for a second. I had to put the book down because he was like hitting everything that was fitting like what I was doing. And then he said, you're a liar. And I was like, I'm not a liar. I'm not dishonest. And I had to sit down and think about it. And it makes sense because you're not articulating what you need. So if you're going to do something like this and it's a give and take, that's the only thing that I would say is like kind of the requirement is if you're going to give and take like that, a reciprocal type thing. If you say like, you're going to go to the gym for an hour and after I do that, I'm going to watch the kids when I get home or something like that, or I'm going to put the kids to bed, or I'm going to do bath time or whatever it is, but make sure it's exactly defined what the expectations are. So nobody feels resentful about it. And if some of that resentment pops up anyways, then you need to discuss it and see why, because it's okay to not be happy about it. Like your wife might not be happy that you're taking time for yourself, but if you need it, then you need it. And that's kind of like one of the things about marriage that I have had to learn too, is your spouse isn't always going to be happy with you. Like you're going to upset your spouse and you have to consider their feelings, but their feelings are not your feelings. You don't have to take on their feelings. That's another thing that I do often is if my wife is upset, I will then be upset. And that's wrong. That's a huge boundary violation. You're taking on someone else's feelings. You should absolutely consider their feelings and say, all right, she's upset. What have I done something that's upset her? And is there something I should do different and consider it? But I don't have to feel upset about it. If I'm doing something that's for me and I'm well within my boundaries to do it and we discussed it and she understood the expectations and she still feels resentful, we should discuss that because I want to know how she feels, but I don't have to change what I'm doing because she's upset. We've discussed this and agreed upon it. So.
Right. And, it's not to say you go out of your way to do things that are
upsetting. No, you don't go out of your way to do it. That's why you discuss it ahead of time. But even if you discuss things and set boundaries, people will sometimes agree to things at the jump, and then when it actually happens, the feelings come in because you can't like control your feelings; they just happen sometimes. And the big thing is not to hide it. You don't want to hide it. You got to discuss it.
And then you sit down and you discuss it and you work it out, and maybe you change the way you do it next time.
Yeah, like I saw this we're both in that Order of Man group, correct? I saw this in a post in that, and I'm not going to use names because quite frankly, I don't remember the names. I don't want to put anybody on blast, but a gentleman there made a post about something with his wife that he felt like she had neglected him in some way. And he had talked about it with her and he said, I talked about it with her and I'm okay, but now I'm still feeling resentful. And that's what I said to him. I was like, this sounds like you're not okay with it. Like you say you're okay, but if you're still resentful, you're not okay with it. So even though you've discussed it, you need to discuss it again. She doesn't necessarily need to change her behavior because of that, but you need to tell her how you feel because otherwise that's dishonest. You're not telling her how you feel. So.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think we pretty much put a nail through that one.
Yeah.
So I know you wanted to talk about the book you're reading a little bit.
Yeah.
We move on to that.
Yeah. So I talk about a lot of the books I read in here. I'm a very avid reader, and a lot of what I read nowadays is very like geared towards mental health stuff or, the journeys that people go through in their lives and mental health journey. So right now I'm reading a book by Robert Bly. It's called Iron John. And it's kind of a collection of legends and mythology and the religion and a lot of old stories that it's kind of the journey that men go through, like boys turning into men, and like it kind of pulls together all of those legends and points to all the similarities and all the innuendo and symbolism and all the stuff that's in there that, all of these ancient civilizations understood that we are now doing wrong and we aren't doing. And he's pointing to that as like, this is why a lot of people are having mental health issues and having problems later in life, is because this is ancient knowledge that has been known inherently for a long time. And our DNA and like our programming still knows it, and it knows we should be doing it, but we're not doing it. And it's causing, he makes the argument that that's causing problems. Like one of the symbolism things he talks about is there's a story in there that talks about different stages of your life. And the story uses the image of a red horse, a black horse, and a white horse as the symbolism. Like at different points in your life, you're riding a different horse. And the white horse is supposed to be like very, pure. Think of like a white knight, pure, honest, empathetic, fights for good. The red one is supposed to represent passion, anger, conflict, stuff like that. And the black one is more of a acceptance of the difficulties, and like almost a little bit of like a cynicism type thing. That was a little harder to explain for me, but for example, an example of the black horse part that he uses is there's a story of Abraham Lincoln later in his presidency where Robert Bly makes the argument that he is kind of on the black horse at that point, and somebody wakes him up in the middle of the night. It's a mother of a soldier, and so the soldier had traveled like through the night to get to Washington D.C. for something, and he ended up being on guard duty that day and fell asleep on duty, and they were going to shoot him. They were going to execute him for falling asleep on watch. And the mother came in and talked to him and said, they're going to execute my son. And he could have reacted in a lot of different ways. He could have said, what are you doing here? Get out of my chambers. He could have said, well, the white, that would be the red response. The white response would be, well, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. We have rules and you have to follow the rules. But he took the black response and all he said was, well, shooting him's not going to help him very much. And he went out and stopped stopped from happening. But he's always said, well, shooting him's not going to help him very much. And it's an interesting thing. But he makes the argument for a lot of these things that there are stages in specifically a man's life that they go through. And if you don't go through all of them, then it ends up leaving you not completely whole. And like, for example, the red stage is one that I think our society doesn't go through nowadays. Like it's very discouraged. Everybody's discouraged to be white right away, to be like, empathetic and kind and don't wrong people. Like society wants you to be that, right? They don't want you to be angry and passionate and conflict with everyone. But the way he says is like, if you don't go through that, you're going to come back to it later. So for like with me, that's exactly kind of how it went for me. I didn't do that. I didn't work on how dealing with conflict and dealing with anger. So I was trying to please everyone, trying not to be a problem for anyone. And now later in life, I end up resentful and angry, and it's like completely follows. And like, as I was reading it, I was like, yeah, this is almost like the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. There's a lot of parallels here that I can see to where I didn't go through that. I didn't get that red phase. So now I'm coming back to it now, where I'm having to set boundaries and be a little abrasive sometimes, and really like clear my space and set my own boundaries. And that's hard. And somebody who has been through a stage of like being abrasive, being boisterous, being loud, being angry, being passionate, they've already kind of lived that part, and they've learned how to deal with conflict. And then you can kind of peg the meter back to where you're in the middle. But if you've never explored that, then it's hard to find where the middle is.
That's, geez, that's real interesting.
It's a lot. That book is not an easy read. And
yeah, I was just looking it up because I know you'd mentioned it before. So it was written in 1990.
Yeah, the whole story is based off the story of Iron John, which is a kind of coming of age story.
Right.
And it's very
grim. It's a grim fairy tale,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yeah. It comes from that. And there's also, I mean, there's lots of other, the Grimm brothers put it on paper, but there are a lot of other legends that are effectively the same story, just with different imagery from all kinds of different civilizations.
Right.
He points to a lot of them. He points to Greek mythology, he points to Roman myths, and shows that, this is the same imagery. It's just a little bit different. They adapt it to their culture. Like he talks about how the boar was a symbol in some cultures. And then when the Christians came, the symbolism was moved to a sheep, because it was the sheep was the symbolism for a lot of things.
Take my dust. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think one of our biggest problems, culturally speaking, especially here in the country, is there's a lot of pushing off of personal responsibility. At least the way I see it. I think that's why you see a lot of the issues that you see now in our country in general. People have to get faced with that point where they have to deal with the consequences for the actions that they take. And then, whether that's a major consequence, like going to jail, or a minor consequence, like losing a job is pretty major too, but it's not as major as going to jail or something like that. But, it puts people down these paths of, well, now I need help coping. And, then you get people doing drugs, and you got people who seek out the wrong kind of attention, for instance, especially like inner cities, you have kids that in droves head towards gangs because it's the only place that they can get the attention that they crave. There's a lot of issues in this country, and a lot of them draw from parents not doing a good job raising their kids. I believe that personally, whether it's because they don't have parents, which usually is no fault of the child, obviously. I would say for me, the reason that I had as many issues as I did was because of my mom. Again, not so much her fault because she had mental health issues, but you can trace a lot of my issues, in fact, almost all my issues, back to everything that happened with my mom when I was a kid. So, how do we fix that?
Yeah, and I have a lot of similar stuff because my mom was an alcoholic, and I'm gonna echo what you just said. Like when I talk about stuff like this with my parents, or stuff in my past, or even people, other family members, I'm not blaming them for this stuff. I'm not trying to talk down to them. Like they did the best they could with what they had, and it just is what it is. But I still have to address it and look at what happened, because with my issues of abandonment, that's what started my whole behavior of caretaking and not setting boundaries and trying to be the white, like the empathetic, never a problem to anyone, the perfect little angel. And but that keeps you in that stage of kind of being a little boy. And going into the Navy was kind of a pseudo mentor for me and brought me through some of that journey. But as we both know, the Navy is not the greatest mentor. There's a lot of things that you don't learn in the Navy that a mentor would teach you.
Right.
And I think, I had therapy right before this actually. And I'll share that I was talking about this with my therapist, that I feel like there are some things that the Navy taught me that made me better. But I also think that I came into the Navy with some things that I lost when I was in the Navy. Like, I think that the Navy made me more open-minded, because where I grew up in kind of the middle of nowhere in South Dakota. And if you don't travel out of like your hometown ever in your life, you kind of live in a little bit of an echo chamber. And I have noticed, and I'm not trying to make a generalization, but I have noticed that I had, at least in my experience, I had a hard time identifying with people who were different than me. And that different, it could be different culture, different place where you grow up, different religion. It could be any number of things, just different. That difference I was afraid of in some ways. And that fear made it difficult for me to accept them and learn who they were and be empathetic. Now, you join the military, you're thrown right in the middle of it. You got no choice. And also, now you all have a common jumping off point. You've all been through the same thing. You've all been through boot camp. You have that in common. You've all been through the schools. So you have that kind of jumping off point and common ground to start. And I think that made me a lot more open-minded and able to meet people of different cultures and different backgrounds and learn about how they live life and be more accepting of it, and realize that there are people that live in this country that live completely different than I did. That the way I grew up is not the only way to live.
Right.
And something I would say that I lost coming into the Navy is I think that I had a very strong, that whole white knight complex. Like I was very, very big on truth and morals. I wasn't super religious, but if you think about that as almost like a religion thing, like very, very heavy on that. Like you don't lie, you don't do the only thing that I did that was kind of sinful was drink. But I was very heavy on that stuff. And then being in the Navy for a while, like that stuff starts to erode a little bit. You see some things in the Navy.
Yeah, you become sandstone on the beach.
Yeah, I became very cynical by the end of my time in the Navy. And
yes,
I would say that was, like I said, give and take. Like there's some things I picked up that I think helped me. The cynicism thing is not helpful. That's something
Right.
that I have been working to pull back. But I think the Navy was kind of a mentor thing for me, but it doesn't do the job of helping you like differentiate from your parents. And I never got the chance to do that with my mom because she left. She
Right.
left me. So I never got to like differentiate myself and become my own man in that because she left. So that's, I joined the Navy, and that, if you read the book, it totally points it out. It's like people that didn't get to do that with their mother or father often will find another thing to do it for them or try to do it for them. And that's like another mentor basically. So that was what the
Right.
Navy was for me.
Right.
And, I'm working my way down this path now, and a lot of it starts to make a lot of sense. And once you start working through that stuff and learning how the process works, then you can try to improve upon things and try to look at the experiences that you don't have and the skills that you don't have and try to kind of play to your strengths and learn things about what you're bad at.
Right. I too found a lot of different things about myself through my time in the Navy. Like, but especially on Reagan. I like to think that in between Reagan and Truman, my time on Shorty and stuff, I changed a lot of the negative stuff I kind of picked up on Reagan, and that was through various different means. But I got to Reagan, and I barely ever sweared ever when I first got to Reagan, even after all that training and everything.
That changes in the Navy, though. That's hard. That's a hard one.
Yeah. I was a very optimistic person, and Reagan eroded all of that very quickly. That's why I laughed when you said that.
It's a Reagan, and we talk about this a long time. I can't stress enough how much of a meat grinder that place was. It's just soul crushing. And
yeah. Yes.
The whole trap you don't want to fall into, though, is that person that you were when you showed up to Reagan. You're never getting them back. You don't even want to try. I tried to do that when I was getting out of the Navy after I started having all of my issues. I spent a lot of time trying to get back to that person. That person's dead. He's not there anymore. You got to accept where you're at and realize that like you can lose things about yourself that were good. That happens. Like it's just like almost like a skill. Like if you don't, marksmanship, if you don't go shoot often, you're not going to be a good marksman anymore. If you don't exercise morality and, stuff like that often, it starts to erode. And if you're cynical, cynical, fatalistic, and like that's your mentality about all your stuff at work, it's going to start bleeding into the rest of your life. And you're going to lose that spark, that light that kind of keeps the optimism. And it's hard to get it back.
Right. Yeah. One thing I was pretty proud of, when I first got to Truman, was I was able to be optimistic again. It was like, going back when I had re-enlisted the second time, I did it for medical reasons for my son.
you know, I said, okay, you know what, this is going to bring me to, you know, I think it was going to bring me 13 years in the Navy. Because I have like technically I have like a whole another year left of my contract, but obviously I'm medically discharged as of 2 weeks from now. But you know, and I was like, I'm gonna get 13 years, it's another 7 years at that point, you know. And so I decided I was gonna make it 20. And you know, I got to Truman and I was like, I can't be negative. I can't. And so I showed up there, very positive mental attitude. Some people will remember it, some people won't. But I was like, no, this is going to be good this time.
Did it help, like when you were realizing the second time that you were doing it for your son? Did that make it feel like it was more of a mission?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, you know, in reality, did I need to re-enlist for him? No, probably not. But it was because of where he was and like the diagnosis stuff. Like I didn't want to have to like switch insurances. Like he was already a year into appointments and stuff, and I didn't want to risk having to switch insurances and then them being like, oh, we don't accept that insurance, and then having to like start all over with someone else or something. Like I didn't know if that was going to happen, so I didn't want to risk it, so I re-enlisted. And obviously if you're going to re-enlist, for me it was like, well, I need to maximize my bonus now because
yeah. And I just wondered, because something that I had realized that I am still missing at this point is kind of a mission.
Yeah.
Like something to work towards that I'm passionate about and that I'm like, you know, wholly committed to. And, you know, there's things that I'm committed to in my life, but I don't really have that like passionate thing. And that's why I was asking, is I wondered if like re-enlisting for that reason, maybe that made it easier to be positive about it. And like, cause you have like a mission in front of you. Like, this is why I'm doing this.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it definitely made it easier. You know, it also made it easier for me to be separated from them, for at least at first. Mm-hmm. You know, because it was like, well, no, we're doing this because, you know, my son, like we're doing this for my son. You know, it gave me that. But like that 2000, like I've said this a couple times now, that 2018 deployment destroyed me. It's not any one person's fault or anything. It's just that between everything breaking as often as it broke and, you know, getting back home and then not being able to be with my family, it was just soul crushing. That deployment was absolute soul crushing. And if you look at me over the course of that deployment, you could see me start kind of like petering out, you know, and then, you know, 6 months after being home, that's when I really started to crash. And I think some people saw it. Some people noticed it, and they, you know, one of my chiefs even was like, "Are you okay?" Like, this is like probably 2 months before I attempted suicide. He's like, "Are you all right?" Like, I'm like, "No, I'm fine. All right. I just need to get through, you know, this sea tour, and I'll be out of the Navy." You know, that's what I'm looking at trying to do right now. Just trying to get through this sea tour and get out of the Navy. And you know, people noticed. People definitely saw that I was struggling, but no one was going to turn me in. No one was going to go say anything because they knew where I was in life, and they thought that I was okay because I said I was okay, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, going in, I had great mental attitude, and it was like that environment, that work, everything just kind of just slowly just wore me down again.
Yeah. And it's understandable. And, you know, with them not, you saying like them not turning you in, that's part of the reason we started this podcast, is because it's so hard to make that decision to ask for help when you're in that position, because the consequences are so high. And it's very easy to make that decision because you don't ever, I know I have never made an attempt like you have, but I would wager that you didn't wake up every day thinking that you were going to, that was going to be at the end of the tunnel. Like when you were making the decision, like, you know, I can go one more day.
Right.
That's kind of how I was. And I never got to the point where I had the thought that I was going to harm myself, but there was a lot of days where I was just waking up and saying, you know, it's all right. I can make it one more day. And, you know, you kind of just buck up and do it. But there's a point where that's just not the right answer anymore. And
right.
But
go
ahead. You got nowhere to go though. You
right.
You have no help.
Yeah. And, you know, and I had suicidal ideations here or there, but it wasn't like I was ever said that to anyone. I was like, yeah, I'm going to kill myself. Like, this is going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
it was,
That
it
would
it was
force the
more-
consequences we're just talking about. That would bring those
Right.
about. Like,
Exactly. But I think people noticed the change in work ethic. People noticed the change in quality of my work. People noticed, kind of my laziness to things. I became very apathetic about a lot of different things that I used to be super serious about just like a month or two before. And, those were the signs, and people saw them, people noticed them, and they didn't speak up because they didn't want to screw me over. Just like you said, like they did not, they knew where I was. They knew what was going on with me, but they did not want to say something because they know what happens on the back end. And here's the messed up part. And, we haven't had to get, there's a guy that I really want to be on here because he kind of went through a similar scenario that I did. But he got his bonus recouped because the path that he went through, the path that he got like medically discharged from and whatnot, it screwed him over because it didn't happen just right. And so he got his bonus recouped, and that's why people don't say anything, because if you try to get someone help, you might be costing them $10,000, $20,000, $30,000.
And that's one of those things like that can't happen. Like, we can't have that in our community. There can't be the overwhelming threat of something like that looming over people's heads because they won't ask for help. They won't. Like, people will look at it and it's like, I can't pay for that. Like, I can't.
Right.
I can't, what am I going to do? Like,
right. Like when I re-enlisted in 2015, I got my, 50% up front and I paid off debt. It's not like I didn't invest any of this. Like, I had debt that I had to pay off, and I paid off debt to help out my monthly cash flow, and that's what happened to it. So like, if they had, if this had gone the wrong way and it came out the other direction, I basically wouldn't be getting any tax returns for like the next 10 years, It's a ridiculous thing. I understand why it kind of has to be that way. Like, you want to discourage people from like re-enlisting and then finding ways out. Because I know people, and I know that people will try to do that. And so like, I understand why there has to be that kind of like catch-all. But if we just allowed people to get treatment and then still serve, this wouldn't even be an issue anyways. Like, you wouldn't have people getting kicked out for mental health issues because they would get treatment and then return to service.
Yeah. And like, now that I understand mental health better, the way I look at it is like, what is so wrong with someone seeing a therapist? Like, what's wrong with that? I don't understand. I don't get it. Like, that's like the most frustrating thing, because like you said, like, you have a gun to your head, basically. Like, you can't do anything. You're stuck. Like, work or die. Like, work or we take your career and your money. Like,
right.
And
and hopefully, like we saw with John, it seems like that mentality is getting better.
Mhm.
It seems like there's some improvement coming, as far as people actually getting help and not getting screwed over the second they go and get help. I don't think that we're quite there where we need to be, because it still seems like, you get issued medication and now all of a sudden that's also still a huge issue, even though there's plenty of medication that's not actually mind altering. In fact, if anything, it's mind improving.
Yeah.
And we're just going to sit here and pretend like, well, you on medication is now a problem. Like, well, I was unmedicated before and operating fine. So how about we give some people some medication and then they can actually operate probably better. It's just like any other physical ailment. Oh, hey, you have a broken wrist. Let's heal that, and then we get back to work. I hope that we can help make that change. Not us personally, because I don't think that the two of us are going to make that change happen, but as a community, that we can make that change happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to be talked about, and I hope that what we're doing here helps to raise that issue at least to a few people, and I hope it spreads and people hear about it, because it is a huge problem. And
right.
it's hard to live life with like a boot on your neck, basically, where it like amplifies the feelings of like hopelessness too, because you know that there's no way out. You know that if you bring your problems up, you're losing your job and getting money taken and everything. So
Right. So for anyone who's watching live, for those maybe listening podcast, we actually went live on Facebook. Yeah, I think it's something we'll probably start doing every time. I mean, it's super easy. I'll just click a button now that I have it set up. But I have chat open, like the messages on one screen over here. And so as we do this, I'd like to kind of make this more interactive, allow you guys input where we talk, where we go, and because we've kind of strived away from the structured podcast as more to like a free, open discussion type thing, and I like it. I think do you like it or dislike it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I like it, and all I do for the structure part is like I come with some prepared topics sometimes.
Right.
Like if there's something that I come to that like gives me that like light bulb moment and like, oh, this is kind of profound, and
Right.
I try to bring up the stuff that I screwed up, because that's the stuff that I feel like sticks in my head the most. It's like, I did this wrong for years and now I see the error of my ways and I would like to share it with other people so they can hopefully not do what I did wrong. But
Right.
so I will spend time like once a week writing, and sometimes I will bring that to here, and sometimes I won't share it. Sometimes it's too personal and I just keep it. But it's, other than that, like I do just like you did. Like I come here, talk about what's going on, the issues of the week, current events, talk about the Navy, talk about, mental health in general.
Speaking of which, last week we talked about the Beirut explosion briefly.
We should probably follow up on that just real quick, because I know we know a lot more now
than we knew literally minutes after it happened.
last week.
Yeah.
And then I meant to look into this and I forgot. I know that there was a couple other explosions, not nearly as big, but in various other spots around the country, or around the world. Sorry, and it's kind of weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw that too. Like somebody put that together as a correlation, and it could all be just the world is a very big place, and a lot of times we just don't see stuff like that compiled. So it could be just they could be related or they could not be. I didn't really put a whole lot of stock in that, but
right.
What I've learned about the whole Lebanon thing is it looks like it was a whole bunch of ammonium nitrate that was stored in a warehouse.
Yeah,
like 2,700 tons of it.
Right.
And so it sounds like it was like somebody there was making knockoff ammonium nitrate and putting another company's name on it and selling it. And the port in Lebanon seized it in Beirut. And instead of doing something with it, they put it in a warehouse, let it sit for like 7 years.
Right.
So they just had a giant bomb just sitting there for 7 years waiting to go off. And it eventually did. It caught fire and it was just a giant bomb.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, and I think it was the president or the prime minister, whatever they have there in Lebanon.
He had said something to the effect that, yeah, it's my fault. Like, yeah, it is your fault. You're right. You and everyone else that failed to do anything about this, that knew about this, yes, it's your fault. But I mean, I've watched the videos just a couple times just for fun.
It's a crazy.
Not that it's a good thing, but
there are bad things that are still amazing to watch. And that's one of the things. It's hard to understand how big that explosion was.
Exactly.
We've both seen explosions from like ordnance and stuff like that, and like how big those are. Like that's bigger than any explosion I've ever seen. It's just massive. And
yeah, but so there was that last week. I looked for a report earlier this week on the Bonhoeffer Shard. I don't think there's still an official report that's been released on that.
It's probably going to be a while.
Yeah, I would assume it's going to be probably at least a month.
I'm trying to think. There was something else that happened that I wanted to talk about. I forgot what it was.
Somebody took a pot shot at a Huey over Virginia.
Yeah. You asked me if I saw that. Yeah, that's crazy.
So what I mean by a Huey, so Huey's was a UH1, I think, is what they were like designated.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
don't know.
old school. Remember the old Vietnam helicopters? That's a Huey. So there's a Huey that is still attached to the president's detail for like when he transports to different places. So this Huey was flying in Virginia. There, I don't remember what they said, if they were doing like a training mission or if they were actually transporting the president. But somebody took a pot shot at it, like shot it literally with some type of weapon and hit a crew member.
Yeah.
And they landed. They got the guy some medical attention. I guess he's okay. I guess, it wasn't a bad hit, but that's crazy that you have people in the United States shooting at military helicopters right now.
Also, I'd just like to say that's an amazing shot.
It's a lucky shot. There's no way it was intentional. Like,
Is it lucky?
Yeah.
Was it lucky? No, it's probably lucky. But yeah, I mean that's an amazing shot in itself. But why? What is your goal? What is your goal?
I don't know what else is flying with them, but you shoot at the wrong helicopter, they're going to know exactly where you are. Because some of them have very sophisticated sensors.
Yeah.
Like I know the Pavehawks that the Air Force uses, they could tell what side they're being shot at from. Like they have sensors that go off and everything. And
right. Yeah. I wouldn't do it. Yeah, I also wouldn't have a reason to do it, but
yeah, I think about like, what if they would have saw the shooter? Like what would have happened then? Like, I don't know if the helicopter was armed. Like, do they go after the guy? Like what do they do? Like,
rules of engagement. I don't think you're allowed to shoot on U.S. citizens unless you absolutely have to.
You think about that. You think about that moral wise too. Like, I don't know if I feel like they would be justified in doing it or not, but I know if I was in that helicopter, I would feel justified.
I mean, yeah, you can't protect yourself, but I mean, that's when you fly low. You just dive,
Yeah,
get out of the way. But I mean, yeah, that's crazy. But I think we're probably going to wrap up today. I don't see any other questions coming in on the live, and this is kind of like a test run for that. And I think as we do it more, we might get more people that want to stop in and pick our brains on stuff. If not, that's cool too. But yeah, I think we'll start wrapping this up. Call it a day.
Sounds good.
So
I'll get the socials up here.
Okay. So if you'd like to be on, we are still. I think we have one coming up probably next week or two. Right?
Yeah, I got to contact somebody that contacted me and asked if they're available. They said September, so we'll see when they're available.
Right. But, yep. So next couple of weeks, we'll definitely have a guest. If you'd like to be on, just let us know. We'd love to have you on. It's very simple. If you're on Facebook Live, you literally see that we're using Squadcast. And so I give you a link. You join the link, and you talk, and we talk about whatever. We can talk about your story. We can talk about a specific event, or we can just talk about whatever, just like we talked about today. Just let us know, and we'll get you on here. And man, it's number 18.
Yeah,
number 18 is going to be in the books.
Yeah, it really, like you said, it really is super simple. Like I kind of thought when we were starting a podcast, like I saw that as like a barrier, like it was going to be difficult to set it up. It really is pretty simple to send a link and to get onto it. Like, David set it up, but I went
for the simplest solution. Like I did a bunch of testing when we first started doing this with my little brother. My little brother and I did a bunch of different tests over a bunch of different platforms, a bunch of different things. And this is the one. This was the easiest one to work with.
Yeah, and it's worked great so far.
Yeah.
All right, so if you want to get in touch with us on social media, to be on the podcast, to ask us questions, to get mental health resources, you can reach us at Facebook. So it's Facebook/rebootpods with an S. That's Facebook/rebootpods. Our email is rebootpod@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @reboot_pod.
Yep. And so with that being said, you guys have a great week. We'll be back next week at some point, and I'll let you guys know how my first week at my new job goes.
Good luck, man. Should be great.
Yeah, no, it should be great. All right, everybody.
with that being said, have a great week and keep fighting the good fight.
You've been listening to Reboot with David Kagi and Jared Standiford. We hope that you've gotten some useful information from this podcast, and we want you to know we're proud to have you in our family. Mental health is important, and we hope that we've helped break down some barriers. Be sure to catch us next time, and if you have questions, comments, or if you'd like to be on the next show, send us an email at rebootpod@gmail.com. This is Reboot, signing off.